Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 4 of our Sinclair Alba sew along. Today we're going to work on the shoulder yokes and we're going to finish the zipper and finish the cowl. So big day ahead of us. Again, no fright, no fears, just one step at a time. So let's start with the shoulder yokes. You have 2 little pieces cut on mirror images that are your shoulder yokes, and you can start if you want with the one that doesn't have a zipper. Remember yesterday we added half the zipper, so let's start with the side that does not have a zipper, and you can see there's a little notch here that we put. We're going to take the shoulder yoke that accompanies this side and match the notch. So if you're not sure, the notches will tell you which one goes where. So right sides together, I'm going to do a serger stitch with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for the shoulders. Easy peasy. And then I will top stitch. It's optional, but I will top stitch the seam allowance up. And if you hear a cat in the background, my apologies. It's the cat that refuses to understand he's not allowed in here. So now take your other side, the one that has the zipper, and it looks like a weird shape. This is the facing. We're not working with that right now. This is the extension, the zipper, and the main part. So we're going to add our yoke here at the top like this, and the notch is where the zipper meets the facing there. Okay, not the facing, the exterior and the main. So let's sew this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, just like we did on the other side. Make sure that you keep your seam allowances towards the main part, towards the arm side. And what you have left up here is just enough to stitch this. So let's go ahead and top stitch. I'm top stitching the seam allowance up. So if you have your zipper foot left from yesterday, change that to a regular presser foot. So now I'm top stitching the seam allowance up. It doesn't need to be a stretch stitch, it can be a straight stitch. Now repeat that on the other side. Again, the shoulder yoke, the seam allowance goes up towards the shoulder. So gorgeous. Beautiful. Okay, so let's put this aside for now and grab your facing. You have only one facing left. You have a facing that has one rectangle marking, and it has interfacing on one side. So what we're going to do, we're going to fold a 1/4 of an inch at the top, and we're going to stitch that down. You can press it if you want, but we do need to stitch that down just to hold it in place. Okay, this side the one that has like this rectangle here, is visible inside the jacket. So you want to finish that side with your serger. Since you're using woven, it won't fray. So if you don't mind the look, you don't have to. But if you want it to look more put together, definitely run a serger stitch through it. And you can cut off the marking rectangle now. You don't need that. That was just so you differentiate between those two facings. So we know which one goes where. So right now your facing should look something like this. One edge serged, finished, and the top is folded, and this side has the interfacing. So now we're ready to go back to finishing the zipper and working with the zipper. Alright, we are back. We're going to start creating the other half of the zipper part. So in order for me to not move your camera back and forth, I'm going to go ahead and pin in place, then we'll stitch as much as I can. So let's start by grabbing your panel that does not have a zipper, okay? This is my panel. Yours may look reversed depending on how you cut your fabric. So mine looks opposite as the tutorial. It's because I cut the fabric from the wrong side up. Nothing wrong with it. So let's grab this and let's grab the facing that we worked on, okay? Facing that we worked on, and match the sides that have the interfacing, okay? So this one is shorter, and we're going to bring it all the way down, and we're going to match it here at the bottom and stitch in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For now, I'm just going to put a few pins just so I don't move you back and forth from the table to the sewing machine that's behind me. One day I'll have 2 cameras, but it's going to be a while. For now, we'll work with what we have. So here you'll be stitching on the bottom where I put the pins. You'll be stitching with, so right here, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay? So once that's stitched, you're going to bring your cowl. Remember, we made a cowl on day 2, I believe, that has a side that's the wrong side, that is without folds, and a right side that has those pleats, one side that has a raw edge and interfacing, and one side that's sewn. So you're going to take the side that has the raw edge, the one that's with the pleats, so the right side, and you're going to match here. See, your interfacings will match as well. So you have the interfacing from the cowl and the interfacing from the main. So you're going to match this and pin in place, and you're going to stitch to where the shoulder seam is. There's a notch on the cowl that will match the part where the yoke meets the front. So you're going to pin that one in place and then pin the rest of them. You're going to do both these steps on the sewing machine to reduce any bulk, not on your serger, okay? Okay, so this is the side with the pleats again, the side with the pleats of the cowl, and it's pinned so that the interfacing matches, and it's only pinned, and we're only going to sew it up where the yoke starts. So see, the shoulder yoke is here, and we're going to stitch just here, okay? Let's assume both of these are stitched. I will do it in just a second. You're going to bring now your lining of the cowl. So this is the lining, the one with no pleats. And you're going to match now the lining with the facing. So this is my facing, the little one that has the raw edge serged. So this is facing. I'm going to match it like so. Again, matching the interfacing. See, I have a strip of interfacing here, a strip of interfacing here. So now the interfacing will become continuous. And we're going to pin this in place. And again, this one will take us, once we pin it all in place without stretching, to where the notch is. Almost. And again, we're going to go ahead and stitch that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now, as you can see, you have created a loop. So let's go to the sewing machine. I'm going to go and stitch this again. I'll stitch this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'll stitch the cowl parts with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Only up until where I put my pins. And I'll see you back in a second so we can add the zipper. We now have everything stitched in place. So the shoulder, one side of the cowl with the facing, the other side, the right side of the cowl with the main, right sides together, and then the bottom of the facing with the other side of the band. So now you have a loop, okay? So what you want to do, you're going to bring the loop and lay it flat so that the band is now folded in half, okay? And we'll press this seam allowance down. The cowl and matches here the shoulder, the facing and the main, okay? And here the cowl is folded in half once you press that loop flat. So now what you want to do is grab your other side of the separating zipper, and you're going to make sure that you place your teeth right sides together with the main. So this is my main, this is my facing. My teeth will be like this. So right sides together with the main, and you're going to be sliding this in. Remember yesterday we had a point here that showed 3 inches. This one goes right here where where the band meets the main. So this is my marking. We're going to lay it flat right here where the band meets the main, and I'm going to put a pin. Okay? This is my starting point. So now I'm bringing the top and I'm sandwiching both seam allowances down. So right here, see, the seam allowance from this side of the band and this side of the band go down, both of them. The center of the band, you can see it's here, and your zipper end will be at the end of the band. Okay? Just double checking that it's exactly where it's supposed to be, because everything should be fitting perfectly now. So your center, your zipper, and I'm going to see that notch here for the center of the band. See, it folds perfectly. So I'm going to pin in place the zipper. So now the zipper will be sandwiched in this loop that you created. And you're going to keep going. There's no stretching. That's why we have that interfacing there, which I hope you did not skip, because this will, you want it to look perfect or close to it as possible. So I'm going, now you see the notch here and the notch here match, and they're supposed to. Make sure that the raw edge of the zipper tape and the raw edges are all matching here. So everything right now is just going to fall in place. If you've kept the right seam allowances and everything is just going to fall in place. Okay, so I'm basically just pinning without stretching. Okay, so now this zipper end is going to go right in here at the end of the, like where the cowl ends. And it's going to be right in there, where the fold is. There you go. You can baste in place right now the zipper and the sandwich, but then you need to stitch it down with using your zipper foot. Okay, so we're going to move to the sewing machine so we can stitch this in place. Once it's all pinned down. Okay, make sure that there's no puckers. That's what I'm checking right now, to make sure that there's no puckers in the zipper tape or the fabric before I stitch it down. Use as many clips or pins as you need. So this is what it would look like from one side where the pleats are. And see, you have a continuous loop of interfacing right now. And this is what it looks like on the other side. See, this is the wrong side of the cowl with the facing half of the band, and again a continuous interfacing. So let's move on to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch this down with our zipper foot. Okay, let's work on stitching the zipper. I have my zipper foot already put in there, and I'm going to start from the top and go slow where your zipper teeth are. You can sew over nylon zipper teeth, but you want to make sure that you go slow. You cannot sew over metal zipper teeth. So if you've used metal zipper, do not sew over the zipper teeth. Go slow and as close as you can possibly get to the zipper teeth. You want to make sure that you keep your cowl aligned on both sides, and the seam allowance of the cowl goes towards the bodice. When you get to that part, go slow because there's a lot of layers with all the seam allowances and interfacing, okay? So put the seam allowance towards the bodice. So down. And then keep going. Just be wary that there's a lot of layers over there. Slowly all the way down, and again when you get to the part that has your waistband, the seam allowance is going down as well. On the waistband, make sure that you keep those aligned as best as you can. It may not be perfect the first time around, but it will get there in time. The more albas you make. Okay, go slow, back stitch at the end, and you have added your zipper. Okay, now what you want to do is go ahead at the top here in the corner where your zipper is at the cowl. You want to snip the corner so it reduces bulk when you turn it over. Okay? So now we're going to turn and watch magic happens. So I'm turning it right side out, pushing my corner here. Wow, it is so beautiful. So beautiful. Pushing my corner here at the bottom, snip that one too, where the band is. Oh, this is stunning. Stunning. Totally worth the effort. Okay, and there you have it. You've added your second zipper. Like so. See how beautiful it is? So now, like the pattern says, and we're going to follow the pattern, take your other side and zip it up, just so you have some satisfaction. So I'm just putting my zippers together and zipping it up to watch how beautiful it is. Look how pretty it looks zipped up. Oh, so pretty. Okay, you are allowed to take a second to admire your work. Okay, you've worked to achieve this beautiful look, so definitely admire it. Okay, now that we've admired it, let's go ahead and sew the shoulder seams. So when you have your yokes, you're going to bring right sides together, the back of your jacket. So keep the cowl and everything away. And we're going to work with just these shoulder seams, okay? Right sides together. This is the back of the jacket. Right sides together. Like this. I'll just put a few pins and then I'll use my serger to stitch it, and then I'll top stitch towards the back. Tomorrow is going to be a much easier day. Yesterday and today were the hard days because you had the zipper construction and the cowl construction, but tomorrow is going to be easy. Alright. Okay, so these are the shoulder seams. Let me run a serger stitch on them. If you don't have a serger or you don't use one, then do just a simple triple stretch stitch on your sewing machine. Okay, so now we have something that looks like a vest because it doesn't have sleeves. Okay, so I'm going to top stitch my seam allowance towards the back where the yokes are. Oops, don't forget to change your presser foot from the zipper. And I don't think you need it anymore, the zipper foot. last steps for today are to finish your cowl. I'll show you how the shoulders look like. And then we're going to work on the cowl. Man, this zipper is so pretty. Alright, so at this point, you should have something that looks like this at the shoulders. See? So your back and your front are now attached. And your shoulders are looking something like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the cowl. We are back at the table, so I can show you how to add the cowl. Right now you should have a very weird shape. The front, the back, and this is the cowl. Okay, unzip your zipper that you've admired about halfway, because we need some flexibility here. Now, take your cowl, main part, the one with the pleats, and grab where it meets the lining, okay? Like the edge that's sewn in, this side. So you're going to bring the side of the cowl, right sides together, and clip it here where the facing meets the extension, okay? So let's pin that in place. I'm only pinning the right side. I'm not pinning the whole cowl, just the right side, okay? Right sides together, and now follow along. You should have a notch in the cowl. The notch in the cowl will match where your shoulder yoke meets the bottom part. So pin there. Okay, and now let's put clips all around. I'm going to pin everything in place and then I'll stitch it. But important thing is to know and figure out how it all goes together, not to see me stitch on the machine. Okay, so again, the cowl is where the facing meets the expansion panel. Okay, so now we're going to continue along the neckline and we're going to stretch. So this is my cowl. And this is the back of the shirt. We're going to stretch the cowl ever so slightly to fit the neckline and pin in place. So again, this is the cowl here, and this is the back of my shirt with the shoulder yokes. And I'm stretching it to fit. This part here is already sewn from the first day, I think, or second. Okay, so now you should have something looking like this. Okay, right sides together. We're going to continue stitching now, but we're going to stitch the lining of the cowl, the one that does not have the pleats, to the facing. So now you have a facing left here with a folded side, and you have your lining. And you see you have a notch here in your lining, the cowl lining. The facing will end here at the notch, like so. So I'm going to pin that in place. So the facing does not end where the cowl ends. It ends where the notch is. That's why I said on day one, put all your notches on the pattern. Everything will flow together so easily. So I'm going to put a few pins and show you everything, how it's pinned, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine. So you have main of the cowl, right sides together with the shoulder yoke, then the back, then the shoulder yoke, then the front, going. Your seam allowances go towards the lining right here, and then you have your facing and the lining of the cowl about a third way through where the notch ends. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and stitch this down with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on the sewing machine. Don't use a serger for this step because you don't want it to be too bulky. I'll stitch that and I'll come right back to show you. Everything is stitched, so now when you turn it, you'll see how beautifully it comes together. So I've stitched everything that I've pinned earlier. So now if I turn it, I have shoulders and the neckline. There you have it. Let me just open the whole thing up because it is easier to work with the zipper open from now on. Okay, with it open, now you can see the neckline. Let me zoom you out a little bit so you can see it even better. So now you have the lining of the cowl right here, your shoulders, yokes right here. Part of your facing is sewn in the cowl on this side. Part of your facing is sewn in the cowl on this side. And these both have finished ends. Okay? Okay, with the zipper opened and the jacket turned, you can see your cowl right here. And now we're going to bring these raw edges and pin them in place. You have a notch here and a notch here, and those will match the shoulder yoke. So I'm going to pin this all in place. You can baste it if you want to. From now on, it's going to be treated like one piece. Okay, that's why I'm pinning it in place. So now this will be one piece. This is the lining and everything that's left unsewn here. So from this notch here all the way to the other notch. Now this all becomes one single piece. Okay. Next, find the center of your back if you haven't marked it yet. And we're going to mark it with a pin. Okay, so this is the center back. Now find the center of your binding piece that you cut on the first day. We're just going to finish this nicely, basically. So now right sides together with the lining of the cowl, match the center that you just found on the back with the binding piece. So now you're going to pin the binding piece to all the layers that you've just pinned a few seconds ago. Okay, your binding piece now will go into the facing, and I'll show you a close-up. About an inch and a half into the facing. And that's okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so let's move on to this side. And we're going to pin all those layers. There's a lot of layers there. So be cautious of that when you stitch. And again, the binding goes into the facing an inch and a half, and that is absolutely normal. Okay, so this is what it looks like. See the facing right here, and the binding is in here. The facing on this side and the binding inside it here. So this is my binding, this is the facing, And now it's all pinned together like so. This is the lining right side, this is the binding right side. And now I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine and stitch all around from one point to the other, the whole binding piece on this edge. Okay, so now the cowl, the binding, and the bodice are all stitched together like so. So now we're going to fold the binding so it covers the seam allowance, and we're going to press it down. And I'll start from the center so it's easier to understand the process, and then go into the facing. So you'll take your binding, you fold it over the seam allowance, and then you press it down. Okay, and you will need pins for this. Clips won't work. So just pin it in place through the bodice. Okay, so, and you're going to go all the way on both sides. Again, this is my seam allowance. I'm folding the binding over the seam allowance and pressing it down. So this encloses basically the raw edges. You've worked so hard on this jacket to make it look super professional and finish nicely that you don't want to leave it with like raw edges on the neckline. So I keep going. Make sure that you don't catch on the back, make sure that you don't catch the cowl in this fold. You just need it to be pinned to the back bodice, and that's it. Okay. And here, because it went past the facing, this raw edge will not be seen. It will be enclosed in the facing. So this is on one side. Let's move on to this side. And we're doing the same thing. Closing the seam allowance, folding it down, so same thing all the way here. Okay, so keep going, fold your binding inside and lift your facing up, fold the binding inside without catching the facing. Okay, and pin it in place, making sure again that the cowl is not caught in these layers. I will check it before I stitch it. Okay, and you're doing the same thing on the other side. You're pinning, folding, and also under the facing here. So lift your facing up, and you're going to fold and pin all the way. Before we go to the sewing machine and stitch this, which is actually our last step for today, believe it or not, I'm going to check on the reverse side. So now this is all pinned in place, the facings are up. I'm going to check on the back side to make sure that the cowl has not been caught in any of this. Okay, because the cowl has pleats, so it's pretty loose. It's easy to just catch it in those binding, and you don't want that. So double check that your cowl is not caught. Everything looks beautiful. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch this binding in place with a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch, or you can even use a long straight stitch. Let's stitch down the binding. You'll start by putting the facing up right here. And go slow. Make sure that you feel that there's no puckers and everything is laying nice and flat. No rush. You worked so hard to rush right now and not have a beautiful finish to your jacket. So go slow. Make sure again there's no puckers under your bindings. Your back, it's laying nice and flat. And this is your last step for today. I think we've accomplished a lot today. You've done a zipper, a cowl, a binding. That is a lot of achievements for today. So you should definitely be very proud of yourself. Okay, when you get to the other facing, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lift the facing up so we don't stitch it yet. We will do that tomorrow. Just stitching the binding now. That's it. You are done for today. This is what it should look like right now. So the binding enclosed the raw edge beautifully. This is what it looks like from the outside. White thread, but since it's stitched so nicely, I don't mind it. No puckers, no anything, beautiful. So snap a photo of your work for today. Give yourself a big pat on the shoulder, on the back, because you've achieved a lot today. And post that photo in the comments of day 4 photo of the Alba sew along. The Alba sew along is in the Backstitch Backroom on Facebook. Link to the group is in the description. And I'll see you back here tomorrow for our last steps. Tomorrow we're going to add the sleeves, finish the facing, add the cuffs, and drag and earn all the bragging rights. Oh, this looks so good. Look at this cowl. Ah, it looks so good. I love it. I absolutely adore it. Okay, so snap a photo, post it, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye guys.